Daily on the BBC World Service. I'm Frey Lindsay, and today we're talking about ambition and opportunity, access and exclusion.
As a young African, you feel like you have to keep proving yourself over and again. You first have to prove that you're not dubious, and then prove that you can speak English, and then prove that you're good enough to get a job, and then in 2 years' time, prove again that you can speak English again.
Many young people around the world dream of studying or an academic career in the UK. But today we're going to hear how many young African students and academics are running into major barriers in pursuing that dream.
These mindsets prevail that are based on the assumption that excellence and quality must always be associated with the global north, and the global south stands for lack of capacity, lack of intellectual capacity, lack of resources, etc., etc.
That's all here on Business Daily.
My basic challenge was not applying to schools and being rejected, basically. My challenge was more of a financial standing, like coming from, a low-income background family where it wasn't easy to make ends meet.
That's Donatus. He's a young Nigerian academic from Edo State. He wanted to study in the UK, but the UK's immigration ministry, the Home Office, requires foreign would-be students to prove they speak English well via the International English Language Testing System, or IELTS.
I looked at the financial implications and I didn't have it. So as at then, I had to shelve this idea of pursuing postgraduate studies outside of the country. So these exams were a barrier to me accessing international opportunities.
How did that feel when you were going through that process?
Honestly, Frey, I felt frustrated. I felt marginalized. I felt racially segregated to some extent. I felt rejected. Yeah.
Let's take a look at how much these tests actually cost. Okay, IELTS tests Nigeria. IELTS test academic for UK visa and immigration. 89,500 naira. That's about 200 American dollars. The minimum wage in Nigeria is 30,000 naira. That's about $67. So already we're talking several months' worth of wages. But the thing is, well over half of employed Nigerians are in the informal sector, where wages are far lower than official figures. According to the World Bank, almost half of Nigerians live under the poverty line of around 10,000 naira per month. That's $22. And more than 90% of Nigerians live on less than 30,000 naira per month. So for the overwhelming majority of Nigerians, just one of these IELTS tests costs at the very least 3 months' worth of wages. And that's, of course, without spending a dime on food, housing, cost of living.
Raising that amount is a difficult adventure for a lot of Nigerians, and it negatively affects the prospects, the possibilities, the aspirations, the dreams, and the hopes of many Nigerians.
Let's take a look at what these tests cost elsewhere in the world. The cost of the IELTS test in Germany, for instance, is around $250, but the monthly minimum wage for a full-time worker in Germany is around $2,000. So instead of shelling out many months' worth of wages, a young German would be spending at most 1/8 of 1 month's pay on one of these tests. Or take another example, Australia, where it costs... Actually, it doesn't matter at all how much it costs in Australia, because Australia, like the US and Ireland and 16 other states, all of which are in the Commonwealth and all of which have English as an official language, they are exempted from the IELTS requirements. But here's the thing. Nigeria is in the Commonwealth, and the official language of Nigeria is English. Around 3/4 of Nigerians aged 15 to 24 were English literate in 2019, and Nigeria is even ranked 28th on the Global English Proficiency Index, third highest in Africa after South Africa and Kenya.
I think just recently, last week, I was going to apply to the University of Cambridge. Yeah, but they needed a proof of my English competency.
That's Priscilla. She's keen to pursue a PhD in economics in the UK after getting 2 degrees in Nigeria. But because of that testing fee, since 2021, she's not been able to afford the application.
it was quite shocking because for a country like Nigeria, where we have English as our official language, I started preschool learning English, and up until postgraduate level, I was being taught in English. We communicate in English here. So it's a limiting factor in pursuing my studies abroad. So
you've had to save for the last year or two in order to be able to hopefully afford it later this year.
Exactly. So it's one out of many challenges we go through as people who want to make a career in the academics.
Why do you think it's like that? Why is it so expensive?
For me, I think it's a money-making exercise because you take that exam, IELTS, and if unfortunately you're unable to get into graduate school within the next 2 years, that certificate becomes expired. So you have to save up a lot to retake the test again. So for us, a lot of money goes into taking those exams.
An exam where you sort of have to prove something you don't feel like you should have to prove.
Exactly.
Everywhere you turn, it's beyond just the cost and the exam itself. It's the intent behind the exam. Why is an African who is an English-speaking person, made to write an exam multiple times? Is it because of where they're from?
That's Ebenezar Wikina. He's the founder of Policy Shapers, a civic organization in Nigeria. After experiencing his own frustration with the IELTS system, Ebenezar started researching how this was affecting opportunities for his fellow Nigerians, as well as for other Anglophone Africans such as Ghanaians and Malawians. He went on to form a campaign pressuring the UK's immigration ministry to put Nigeria on that exemption list, meaning they wouldn't have to take the tests.
We first wrote to the Home Office in October 2021. We didn't get a response from them up until January when the campaign took off. There was a change.org petition that went viral. We had close to 70,000 signatures. I think currently we have almost 80,000 signatures. The response was pretty much, we've seen your comments, we've seen your response, whatever, we've seen all of your campaign, but this is our requirement. For a country to be added to the majority English-speaking country list, they need to prove that 51% of their population speaks English. So we wrote back to them and said, okay, what kind of proof? Because there's so many ways to prove, right? So what sort of proof do you require? So they said things like a national census. They also accept academic proof, data on language proficiency, information from like the Ministry of Education and everything like that. So we wrote like a 15-page policy brief, and we responded as, okay, so this is all of the data we can find from everywhere, really, the UN and everywhere, putting together our population data, and just try to show them that, everything is pointing towards, our argument, and we actually think we have a good point. So they replied to us March 30th of 2022. They replied to us to say, we've seen your data, makes a lot of sense, but we still can't add you to the majority English-speaking country list. And I mean that was the last information we got from them, because we then wrote back to say, why? What exactly is the reason? Like, do you query any of our data? Any of the sources not good enough? Because these are sources from the UN. Everything is hyperlinked with all of the sources and everything linked to the various sites where we got them. And really, that was the last time, and then there was a government change, and then there's a change again in government now. I've been trying to reestablish contacts, and we've not been able to get feedback since April. I contacted the Home Office about the material Ebenezar and Policy Shapers presented to make their case, and a spokesperson said to be included on the majority English-speaking country list, that's the list that's exempt from taking the tests, more than half of the people of that country must speak English as a first language. Nigeria doesn't meet this requirement. The Home Office also added that to assess a country's eligibility, they consult publicly available evidence, such as official censuses. The last census in Nigeria was in 2006, along with other academic sources, and they consult the Foreign Office, who have their own criteria. The campaign nonetheless generated a lot of attention and support within and outside of Nigeria, even receiving the endorsement of the country's vice president, Yemi Osinbajo.
I agree entirely that, first of all, as an English-speaking country, we should be beneficiaries of some concessions as opposed to being forced every 2 years to take the same test, especially if you had passed it once before. So I think this is something that we should really work on.
And the campaign has also seen some success elsewhere in the world, in other countries where the tests are normally required.
We've sent the same information to universities in Canada, in the US, in Australia, And up to 12 or 13 universities now have scrapped the IELTS requirements for Nigerians, Anglophone Africans, universities like University of Alberta, universities like University of Georgia. So we actually think that we're seeing some glimmer of hope here and there, but we think that the biggest window will come if the UK government does consider this issue, look at its economic implications for African countries, and look at how much of, a barrier it is standing against young people who seek a better life, who seek to contribute, of course, to the UK economy and the UK society, and see the opportunities that they're missing out on, and see that this is a way to ensure people are not excluded from opportunities at the global and international stage.
You're listening to Business Daily on the BBC World Service, and we've been hearing about one institutional barrier for young African students pursuing their academic ambitions in the UK. Here's Ebenezar Wikina again, summing up the mood of many of the young Africans I spoke to for this programme.
As an African, as a young African, you feel like you have to keep proving yourself over and again. You first have to prove that you're not dubious, and then prove that you can speak English, and then prove that you're good enough to get a job, and then in 2 years' time, prove again that you can speak English again. I think it's just all of those hurdles in front of you that just make it seem like you have to constantly keep proving yourself, over and over and over again.